There is a particular stillness that appears around Christmas. Not the peaceful kind people talk about in movies. A different kind. The kind that settles in when you realize you won't be going anywhere. No packed car, no crowded table, no questions about when you're arriving or who you're bringing. For some people, this stillness arrives quietly and without drama. They wake up on Christmas morning and the day feels neutral, like a Sunday, like time paused instead of peaked. They notice the world outside moving in a very specific direction, lights blinking, music repeating, people speaking in a slightly louder, brighter register than usual, and yet internally, nothing rises to meet it. There is no surge of anticipation, no sense of loss either, just an absence of pull. These are the people who spend Christmas alone, not always because they were excluded, not always because something went wrong, sometimes simply because there was no internal reason to do otherwise. A lot of people assume that being alone on Christmas must feel heavy, but for many, the weight comes not from the solitude itself, but from the way solitude is interpreted by others, the looks, the pauses, the softened voices that ask, "Oh, what are you doing for Christmas?" As if the answer must justify itself. Some people have learned to preempt this moment. They give short answers. They deflect. They say they're keeping it low-key or just relaxing. Not because it's inaccurate, but because explaining neutrality in a world that expects enthusiasm feels oddly confrontational. Inside, the experience is often much quieter than outsiders imagine. The day unfolds slowly. No schedule pressing in, no performance required. Meals happen when hunger appears, not when tradition dictates. The television stays on or stays off. The phone remains mostly silent. And what's striking is not what's missing, but what doesn't appear in its place. There is no constant ache, no countdown to when it will be over, no dramatic sense of abandonment. Instead, there is a kind of emotional flatness that feels familiar. For many people who spend Christmas alone, this flatness isn't specific to the holiday. It's simply more visible now because everyone else seems to be amplifying something. They watch others lean hard into rituals, meals that must be prepared a certain way, songs that must be played, feelings that must be displayed on schedule. And from the outside, it looks exhausting. Some of these people have tried participating before. They've shown up to gatherings with good intentions. They've wrapped gifts. They've smiled at jokes they've heard every year. They've endured small talk that feels strangely louder during holidays. And somewhere along the way, a realization formed quietly. The cost of participation was higher than the benefit. Not because the people were bad, not because connection was unwanted, but because the structure itself felt misaligned. Christmas asks for a certain emotional posture, a willingness to be publicly warm, to be nostalgic on cue, to perform closeness in group form. For people who process internally, slowly, or selectively, this posture can feel unnatural. They aren't antisocial. They aren't bitter. They aren't broken. Their nervous system simply doesn't light up in crowded emotional environments. So when Christmas arrives and the volume rises everywhere at once, their instinct is not to join in louder, but to step aside. This stepping aside is often misread. Others interpret it as rejection, or sadness, or avoidance, but internally, it often feels more like conservation, energy preserved, emotion unforced, a day that doesn't demand anything extra. There are also those for whom Christmas carries history, not dramatic history necessarily, not always trauma in the obvious sense, just accumulated friction, years of tension around tables, unspoken rules, conversations that orbit the same sensitive topics, moments where being present required emotional armor. Over time, the body remembers, so when December arrives, something in them pulls back automatically, not out of spite, not out of anger, just recognition. They already know how this story feels in their chest, and they choose not to repeat it. For some, Christmas alone is not a celebration. It's not framed as rebellion or empowerment. It's simply the absence of something they no longer want to rehearse. Others have never really connected to the holiday at all. They grew up observing it, rather than inhabiting it. They watched rituals without absorbing meaning. They learned the rules, but not the emotion behind them. As adults, this becomes clearer. They see how much effort goes into maintaining the mood. How many people feel pressure to feel something they don't naturally feel. And opting out becomes less a statement and more a quiet alignment with reality. I just don't feel it is often the truest explanation, and also the hardest to say out loud. There are people spending Christmas alone who genuinely like the day. They wake up late, they cook something slow, they let movies play in the background. They exist in a rhythm that belongs entirely to them. What they enjoy is not the absence of people, but the absence of obligation. No roles to fulfill, no emotional calibration, no need to match someone else's energy. The day stretches instead of tightens, and in that space, they feel oddly grounded. At the same time, there are people for whom Christmas alone feels dull rather than peaceful, not devastating, just empty in a muted way. They go through the motions of a normal day, work, exercise, scrolling. They notice the holiday mostly by contrast. Stores closed, messages not arriving, the sense that everyone else is elsewhere. For them, the solitude isn't chosen with pride or relief, it's simply what is. And even then, the emotion is often understated. Not crying, not despairing, just a low awareness of difference. Psychologists often note that loneliness intensifies when it is socially highlighted, and Christmas does this relentlessly. It turns connection into a public event, something visible, something shareable. So being alone doesn't just feel like being alone, it feels like being off script. And for people who already live slightly outside dominant rhythms, this can feel familiar rather than shocking. They've always known they experience life at a different volume. Christmas just makes that contrast harder to ignore. What's consistent across many people who spend Christmas alone is not a single emotion, but a shared refusal to force a feeling. They are unwilling to manufacture cheer, unwilling to perform belonging for the sake of tradition, unwilling to endure discomfort just to meet an expectation. And that refusal is often misinterpreted as negativity, but inside, it often feels honest, quietly honest. The day passes, it ends, nothing collapses. And for many of them, that fact alone is grounding. As Christmas moves closer, something subtle shifts in the social atmosphere. People don't just ask questions, they carry assumptions inside the questions. So, what are your plans? Are you going home? Who are you spending it with? The questions themselves aren't aggressive, but they come with an unspoken map of what a correct answer should look like. When someone says they're spending Christmas alone, the reaction often arrives before reflection. A pause, a softened expression, sometimes reassurance offered too quickly. Oh, that's okay though. You could always come to ours. That must be hard. What's striking is how rarely anyone asks how it actually feels, because the cultural script already decided that alone equals lacking. For people who spend Christmas alone by choice or by quiet acceptance, this mismatch becomes familiar. They start to notice that the discomfort isn't inside them, it's in the room. They feel fine, but the world seems uneasy about them feeling fine. This is where stigma quietly enters. In many cultures, Christmas functions as a public display of belonging. It's not just a holiday, it's proof. Proof of family, proof of connection, proof that one is anchored somewhere. So opting out, or existing outside of that frame, is often misread as failure. Not because anyone says it directly, but because the holiday is treated as universal, rather than optional. People who don't participate often become accidental mirrors. They reflect a possibility others haven't allowed themselves to consider, that it's possible to step away and survive emotionally intact. That idea alone can make others uncomfortable. So the narrative is simplified. If someone is alone, they must be lonely. If they're not celebrating, something must be wrong. But the internal experience is far more varied. Some people feel solitude as relief. Some feel it as neutrality. Some feel it as quiet grief that doesn't ask to be solved. Some feel nothing at all. And none of these experiences are as dramatic as the cultural story suggests. There's an important distinction here that often gets blurred: solitude versus loneliness. Solitude is an experience of space. Loneliness is an experience of lack. On Christmas, these are constantly conflated. A person can be alone and feel emotionally complete. A person can be surrounded and feel deeply disconnected. Yet the imagery of the season insists otherwise. Tables crowded with laughter, hands linked, homes glowing with warmth. Against that backdrop, anyone outside the frame is assumed to be missing something essential. But many people who spend Christmas alone aren't missing connection. They're missing obligation. They don't experience the day as a reminder of what they don't have, but as a pause from what they're usually expected to manage. For introverted or overstimulated nervous systems, Christmas can feel like a sensory marathon. Noise layered on noise, emotion layered on expectation, togetherness performed at maximum volume. So stepping away isn't avoidance, it's regulation. Their bodies relax when the social pressure drops. Their thoughts slow down. They breathe more evenly. This doesn't look celebratory from the outside, but internally, it feels stabilizing. Then there are those whose Christmas aloneness isn't fully chosen. People estranged from a family. People who've lost someone and found the holiday altered forever. People whose circumstances quietly narrowed over time. For them, Christmas alone can feel dull, heavy, or strangely hollow. But even here, the emotion is often quieter than expected. Not despair, not collapse, just a muted awareness that the day doesn't carry what it once did. They may scroll, they may sleep, they may distract themselves, and often, the hardest part isn't the solitude itself, but the comparison. Seeing others post, gather, laugh, not because they want the exact same thing, but because the contrast sharpens a sense of being out of sync. This is where Christmas amplifies emotions that already exist. It doesn't create loneliness out of nothing. It highlights what's unresolved, unspoken, or quietly accepted. That's why some people dread the holiday without fully understanding why. They aren't sad every day. They function. They cope. But Christmas puts a spotlight on relational narratives they don't inhabit. And under that light, neutrality can feel like absence. Others, interestingly, relate to Christmas almost academically. They observe it. They notice the rules, the rituals, the emotional choreography. Who hosts? Who travels? Who gives what to whom? They watch how seriously people take it, how anxious they become about doing it right. And from the outside, it looks oddly intense. For these observers, being alone isn't isolating, it's clarifying. They feel less pulled into an emotional economy that doesn't resonate with them. They see Christmas as a social agreement rather than a sacred experience. And opting out feels less like rebellion and more like opting out of a game they never signed up to play. There's also a quiet group of people who've redefined the holiday without announcing it. They still acknowledge Christmas. They might decorate a little. They might cook something intentional, but they remove the social core. No big gatherings, no expectations, no emotional negotiations. Christmas becomes private rather than communal. And in that privacy, it regains a sense of calm. What's consistent across all these experiences is not a single psychological profile, but a shared resistance to forced emotional performance. Christmas asks people to feel something specific: joy, warmth, gratitude, but emotions don't operate on calendars. So for those whose inner world doesn't align with the season's script, spending Christmas alone becomes a way of not lying to themselves, not pretending, not acting, just existing as they are on a day the world insists should feel different. And perhaps the most overlooked aspect of people who spend Christmas alone is how ordinary the day often is. No breakdown, no revelation, no dramatic ending. The day comes, the day goes. They wake up on the 26th, and the world quietly returns to its usual rhythm. For many, there is relief in that, because the holiday didn't break them. It didn't expose them. It didn't demand transformation. It was simply a day they lived through in their own way. And that realization that it's possible to exist outside the cultural ideal without falling apart, often lands softly, not as empowerment, not as growth, just as confirmation. This is how my nervous system works. This is what feels tolerable. This makes sense for me. And in that sense-making, something settles. Not happiness, not sadness, but acceptance of one's own rhythm in a season that loudly insists on a single beat. That's often the quiet psychology of people who spend Christmas alone. Not tragedy, not triumph, just alignment.